Tomorrow is the start of a new season in Destiny, and it's pretty exciting this time around because we've had some big meaty twabs that have outlined quite a few new changes. There's plenty of changes, but there's also some pretty impactful ones, and one of the changes that have really stood out at me most, surprisingly enough, is the Vex Mythoclast buff. Myself, Cammy, maybe some other people probably tore into this weapon. I said that it really was a jack of all trades, tried to be a bunch of things, but really did none of them exceptionally well. And it was pretty outclassed by many things that just specialized in that specific area, like SMGs beat it, or the high impact autos, the long range ones, beat it. Well, it tried to be a hybrid of the two that delivered really neither too well. So Bungie acknowledged that and brought us a pretty crazy buff. I'm gonna go ahead and say on paper, if these buffs are to be as significant as they sound, this gun might be pretty broken. So let's quickly go through this shopping list of buffs that are here for the Vex Mythoclast, and I'll break them down. It's getting a PvE damage bonus by 40%, that's pretty significant. Its range stat is being increased to be close to the best in class for the high impact auto rifles. Again, that's the high range, slow rate of fire auto rifles. It's getting an increased stability stat. It's getting its catalyst reworked to both grant stability and damage after a kill. And it's getting an increased rate of fire from 360 to 390 RPM. It's reducing the linear fusion rifle mode charge time from 820 milliseconds currently to 533, which is the same as a standard linear fusion rifle. And it no longer loses those overcharge stacks on stow, except when, of course, in the linear fusion rifle mode. Yeah, that's a lot of crazy changes, quite literally a shopping list of changes for this weapon. So to start with the range buff, we can expect that it's going to get about 80 range, and that's because most of the high impact autos, especially the best in class, have about 80 range in their range stat. Keep in mind they mentioned that they are directly changing the range stat, which means a few things. It means that this weapon is going to be a little bit more accurate because range does have an impact on accuracy, which is overall going to be better for the consistency of this weapon. Typically right now, without the buff, it's a very inaccurate weapon, so that is a good change overall. And it's not going to get as much range as the typical high impact auto rifle because it has less zoom. It has 15 or 1.5 times zoom, as opposed to most of those high impact autos, which have at least 16 or 1.6 times. So this also means it can go one of two ways now. It's either fully treated as a fusion rifle and will obey the laws of fusion rifle range and how that interacts, or it'll be treated as an auto rifle. If it's treated as an auto rifle, this will give it 28 meters before experiencing any sort of damage drop off, but it'll slowly have that damage drop off and stop experiencing it at 60 meters, which is a lot further obviously. If it's treated as a fusion, it's going to give it 17 meters before experiencing any damage drop off and then stop experiencing damage drop off at 23 meters. We could probably figure out now if it's treated as an auto or fusion, but I haven't tested it personally, and I mean the buff's coming out tomorrow, so we'll see. Now, before we go over some of the other stat bonuses that are being changed, I want to talk about the catalyst changes and the overcharge stacks, which is a little hard to interpret based on their wording. This can either be really insane and crazy, or it could be just a subtle, cool rework. So the catalyst boosts damage on kill with these changes, but it's unclear how long that's going to last, and is that going to be potentially permanent? Because right now the catalyst boosts stability for each stack of its overcharge when you get a kill, and that's permanent for as long as you have those stacks, which right now means you don't swap off the weapon. So is it going to be like you get a damage boost and stability, and that's going to be permanent? Is it going to be a limited time damage boost and then a permanent stability boost based on the stacks? Or is it just going to be completely reworked, because they said reworked, to now give it a stability boost and a damage boost for a short time, but a limited amount of time, because we're going to be able to be keeping the stacks with these changes? I really don't know which way or another this is going to go. And it's kind of hard to tell based on what they said, right? On my initial read, I thought the Catalyst would be staying the same and just gaining additional functionality, but rereading it and going through it, I see that they said rework, which makes it sound like the stacks are now going to have nothing to do with what they currently do. Instead, it's just going to be an enhanced rampage type thing with a stability boost and a damage boost for a short period of time after a kill. And we don't even know how much the damage boost is going to be. If they're trying to match the original Vex Mythoclast and make this a little bit more in line with the original, which was a heavy criticism of mine, it is probably just going to be a limited time stability boost, or at the very least, if the stability boost is permanent, it'll be a limited time damage boost. And it's probably going to be similar or exactly the same as Rampage, because in D1 the Mythoclast had crowd control, which is pretty much what Rampage is now. So it'll be a 10% boost for a little bit of time. If that is permanent, that would be pretty crazy. Maybe if it is a permanent damage buff and it was lower, like 5%, that'll be a lot more subtle and not really impactful in PvP. But with a 10% boost, assuming that it'll get that, that would allow the Mythoclast to kill in 5 headshots, altering the time to kill from 6 shots to 5, the irregular being 5 crit 1 body, and it will get a faster TTK of 0.6 seconds instead of the standard time to kill, which is very, very strong. And we'll talk about that new time to kill in just a moment because the rate of fire is being buffed. To top everything off, keeping in mind that we are now holding charges, we're no longer losing them after kills for swapping, the linear fusion mode gets a buff. The linear fusion mode was already kind of thought of as the strongest mode of the weapon that actually felt pretty good. It was super forgiving because of the low zoom, and it has such high aim assist. It's very, very strong. And the really only thing balancing it was the charge time, which they're bringing down to now just be a standard linear fusion, which is kind of wild to think about. Again, the big thing here is that Vex has an incredibly high aim assist stat and lower zoom, and we know how that interacts. Lower zoom means you get to that sweet spot of the aim assist cone sooner, which means you're going to be able to use this linear fusion mode with some relative ease in close range, especially now that you have a lot more of a faster and forgiving charge time. As far as the stability buff, it's really hard to tell how much of a stability buff it's going to get, but we can make a guess that if they're completely reworking the Catalyst to be a limited time stability buff and damage buff, perhaps they're going to give the stability boost to the Mythoclast to be the equivalent of what it had at 3 stacks all the time, just permanently and inherently with the weapon. I could see that happening because then when you get a kill, it would probably take it to the way that it felt with 6 stacks of stability or 6 of the overcharges, and how that correlates to the stability at least, and gets a damage boost on top of that. So what I'm trying to say is it might just inherently gain the stability that it has, or how it feels when you have 3 stacks of overcharge, which would be really good because this weapon needs higher stability. The stock stability of this weapon is awful. For a weapon that absolutely needs to hit headshots to have a decently competitive time to kill, it's so hard to do that, regardless of if you're being shot or flinched. It's just because the recoil is so erratic and goes everywhere and the weapon's inaccurate, and that kind of just kills your time to kill a lot of the time. So stability buff is actually one that I'm really happy about, and if it works the way that I think it might, that'll be really, really good. Lastly, with the rate of fire buff, I think this is actually a pseudo bug fix style buff. I don't know, it's kind of weird because currently if you have a certain type of heavy weapon on, I forget which one specifically, and you get a kill with the Vex Mythoclast, apparently for a short period of time, it boosts the rate of fire, and I believe the rate of fire actually goes to what it's being changed to now permanently, which is 390 RPM. So it seems like their way of fixing that, but also giving a little bit of love to the weapon, is just boosting the rate of fire on it permanently to 390 RPM. And how that's going to affect our time to kill, it means that we're going to get a 0.77 second time to kill rather than 0.83. Just a subtle nudge, a little wee bit faster. When I see subtle nudges like this in time to kill, I don't think it's going to drastically change how fast the optimal time to kill feels. What it's really going to change more of is more so how forgiving or punishing the weapon is for missing a shot. Currently, this is a very slow rate of fire auto weapon, which means if you miss a shot, it significantly hurts your time to kill. Whereas now it's going to be just a bit more forgiving, and again, I think that will be the more noticeable part. Also, if it's firing more shots at a faster rate, that means you're going to, if you're on target more of the time, you're going to be able to land a little bit more shots a little bit quicker for each time that you're on the head for a certain period of time, of course. You think about SMGs and why they're so good in close range, it's because they have such a high rate of fire. If you miss a shot, it's really not a big deal. It's actually not hurting your time to kill too much, especially on something like the 900 RPM archetypes. And you can get so many headshots in such a short period of time of being on the head simply because it fires at such a high rate of fire. So that's really going to help this weapon mainly with its close range feel and how good or forgiving it is in close range, which again, is going to be just a little bit more forgiving, which is good. I like this change. So all in all, I think these changes are incredible. Will it be broken? I think it could be, but it all depends to me on how exactly this catalyst change and the overcharge stacks are going to work. Honestly, I think that this shopping list are all great changes, but I'm kind of surprised that they went with all of them. And I would have even been content just picking 2, maybe 3 of these out of this list and saying, yeah, that's a great buff, that seems healthy, this will give the weapon more usage. But we are getting all of them. So this can go one of 2 ways. It's either these buffs are going to be very significant, they're the best case scenario, like we talked about, especially for the catalyst changes, permanent damage boost level stuff, or it's going to go the other way, which these sound really significant on paper, but really just are subtle changes to make the gun feel a little bit better, a little bit more consistent and competitive, and have a small damage buff to throw back to how the Vex used to be and be a little bit more similar to its D1 counterpart than a completely different gun. It really can go either way. Either way, I think this weapon is going to be a lot stronger next season, and it can potentially compete with SMGs or kind of be a middle of the pack, you know, not quite close range so much as SMGs, but not quite a sniper auto rifle. It'll kind of fill this far mid-range role, but have a decent close-range performance. A true hybrid, which I think is really cool. So, hoping that this won't be too broken, but if so, I'm ready to run it. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Take it easy.